how's it going? And today we're getting to the next part in our book, Boundaries. Let's get straight to it. What does boundaries look like? The parents of a 25-year-old man came to see me with a common request. They wanted me to fix their son, Bill. When I asked where Bill was, they answered, "Oh, he didn't want to come." "Why?" I asked. "Well, he doesn't think he has a problem," they replied. "Maybe he's right," I said, to their surprise. "Tell me about it." They recited a history of problems that had begun at a very young age. Bill had never been quite up to snuff in their eyes. In recent years, he had exhibited problems with drugs and an inability to stay in school and find a career. It was apparent that they loved their son very much and were heartbroken over the way he was living. They had tried everything they knew to get him to change and live a reasonable life, but all had failed. He was still using drugs, avoiding responsibility, and keeping questionable company. They told me that they had always given him everything he needed. He had plenty of money at home. He had plenty of money at school, so he wouldn't have to work. He would have plenty of time for study and a social life. When he flunked out of one school or stopped going to classes, they were more than happy to do everything they could to get him into another school, where it might be better for him. After they had talked for a while, I responded, "I think your son is right. He doesn't have a problem." You could have mistaken their expression for a snapshot. They stared at me in disbelief for a full minute. Finally, the father said, "Did I hear you right? You don't think he has a problem?" "That's correct," I said. "He doesn't have a problem. You do. He can do pretty much whatever he wants, no problem. You pay, you fret, you worry, you plan, you exert energy to keep him going. He doesn't have a problem because you have taken it from him. Those things should be his problem, but as it now stands, they are yours. Would you like for me to help him to have some problems?" They looked at me like I was crazy, but some lights were beginning to go on in their heads. "What do you mean, help to have some problems?" his mother asked. "Well," I explained, "I think that the solution to his problem would be to clarify some boundaries so that his actions cause him problems and not you." "What do you mean, boundaries?" the father asked. "Look at it this way. It is as if he's your neighbor who never waters his lawn. But whenever you turn on your sprinkler system, the water falls on his lawn. Your grass is turning brown and dying, but Bill looks down at his green grass and thinks to himself, 'My God is doing fine.' That is how your son's life is. He doesn't study or plan or work, yet he has a nice place to live, plenty of money, and all the rights of a family member who is doing his part. If you would define the property lines a little better, if you would fix the sprinkler system so that the water would fall on your lawn, and if he didn't water his own, he would have to live in dirt. He might not like that after a while. As it stands now, he is irresponsible and happy. You are responsible and miserable. A little boundary classification would do the trick. You need some fences to keep his problems out of your yard and in his head, where they belong. Isn't that a bit cruel just to stop helping like that?" the father asked. "Has helping him helped?" I asked. His look told me that he was beginning to understand. Invisible property lines and responsibility. In the physical world, boundaries are easy to see. Fences, signs, walls, moats with alligators, manicured lawns, or hedges are all physical boundaries. In their differing appearances, they give the same message. This is where my property begins. The owner of the property is legally responsible for what happens on his or her property. Non-owners are not responsible for the property. Physical boundaries mark a visible property line that someone holds the deed to. You can go to the county courthouse and find out exactly where those boundaries of responsibility are and whom to call if you have business there. In the spiritual world, boundaries are just as real, but often is not me. A boundary shows me where I end and someone else begins, leading me to a sense of ownership. Knowing what I am to own and take responsibility for gives me freedom. If I know where my yard begins and ends, I am free to do with it what I like. Taking responsibility for my life opens up many different options. However, if I do not own my life, my choices and options become very limited. Think about how confusing it would be if someone told you, guard this property diligently because I will hold you responsible for what happens here, and then did not tell you the boundaries of the property, or they did not give you the means with which to protect the property. This would not only be confusing, but also potentially dangerous. This is exactly what happens to us emotionally and spiritually within ourselves. That is, we inhabit our own souls and we are responsible for things that make up us. The heart knows its own bitterness and no one shares its joy. We have to deal with what is in our soul, and boundaries help us to define what that is. If we are not shown the perimeters or are taught wrong perimeters, we are in for much pain. In addition to showing us what we are responsible for, boundaries help us to define what is not on our property and what we are not responsible for. We are not, for example, responsible for other people. Nowhere are we commanded to have other control, although we spend a lot of time and energy trying to get it. 2 and 4. We are responsible to others and for ourselves. Carry each other's burdens. Many times others have burdens that are too big to bear. They do not have enough strength, resources, or knowledge to carry the load, and they need help. Denying others to do for others what they cannot do for themselves is showing the sacrificial love of Christ. Everyone has responsibilities that only he or she can carry. These things are our own particular load that we need to take daily responsibility for and work out. No one can do certain things for us. We have to take ownership of certain aspects of life that are our load. The Greek words for burden and load give us insight into the meaning of these texts. The Greek word for burden means excess burdens, or burdens that are so heavy they weigh us down. These burdens are like boulders. They can crush us. We shouldn't be expected to carry a boulder by ourselves. It would break our backs. We need help with the boulders. Those times of crisis and tragedy in our lives. In contrast, the Greek word for load means cargo, or the burden of daily toil. This word describes the everyday things we all need to do. These loads are like knapsacks. Knapsacks are possible to carry. We are expected to carry our own. We are expected to deal with our own feelings, attitudes, and behaviors, as well as the responsibilities God has given to each one of us, even though it takes effort. The problems arise when people act as if their boulders are daily loads and refuse help, or as if their daily loads are boulders they shouldn't have to carry. The results of these two instances are either perpetual pain or irresponsibility. Lest we say in pain or become irresponsible, it is very important to determine what me is, where my boundary of responsibility is, and where someone else begins. We will define what we are responsible for later in this chapter. For now, let's look more closely at the nature of boundaries. Are you with me? Good in, bad out. Boundaries help us to guard our heart with all diligence. We need to keep things that will nurture us inside our fences and keep things that will harm us outside. In short, boundaries help us keep the good in and out, keep the good in and bad out. They guard our treasures so that people will not steal them. They keep the pearls inside and the pigs outside. Sometimes we have bad on the inside and good on the outside. In these instances, we need to be able to open up our boundaries and let the good in and the bad out. In other words, our fences need gates in them. For example, if I find that I have some pain or sin within, I need to open up and communicate it to God and others so that I can be healed. Confessing pain and sin helps to get it out so that it does not continue to poison me on the inside. And when the good is on the outside, we need to open our gates and let it in. Other people have good things to give us, and we need to open up to them. Often we will close our boundaries to good things from others, staying in a state of deprivation. In short, boundaries are not walls. The Bible does not say that we are to be walled off from others. In fact, it said that we are to be one with them. We are to be in community with them. But in every community, all members have their own space and property. The important thing is that property lines be permeable enough to allow passing and strong enough to keep out danger. Often, when people are abused while growing up, they reverse the function of boundaries and keep the bad in and the good out. When Mary was growing up, she suffered abuse from her father. She was not encouraged to develop good boundaries. As a result, she would close herself off, holding the pain inside. She would not open up to express her hurt and get it out of her soul. She also would not open up to let support from outside in to heal her. In addition, she continually allows others to dump more pain into her soul. Consequently, when she came in for help, she was carrying a lot of pain, still being abused and walled off from support from the outside. She had to reverse the ways her boundaries worked. She needed fences that were strong enough to keep the bad out and the gates in those fences to let out. She needed fences that were strong enough to keep the bad out and gates in those fences. Let out the bad already in her soul and let in the good she desperately needed. I need to go over that one more time. She had to reverse the ways her boundaries worked. She needed fences that were strong enough to keep the bad out and gates in those fences to let out the bad already in her soul and let in the good she desperately needed. Okay. Examples of boundaries. Boundaries are anything that helps to differentiate you from someone else or shows where you begin and end. Here are some examples of boundaries. Skin. The most basic boundary that defines you is your physical skin. People often use this boundary as a metaphor for saying that their personal boundaries have been violated. He really gets under my skin. Your physical self is the first way that you learn that you are separate from others. As an infant, slowly learn that you are different from the mother or the father who calls you. The skin boundary keeps the good in and the bad out. It protects your blood and bones, holding them on the inside and all together. It also keeps germs outside, protecting you from infection. At the same time, skin has openings that let the good in, like food, and bad out, like waste products. Victims of physical and physical and sexual abuse often have a poor sense of boundaries. Early in life, they were taught that their property did not really begin at their skin. Others could invade their property and do whatever they wanted. As a result, they have difficulty establishing boundaries later in life. Words. In physical world, a fence or some other kind of structure usually delineates a boundary. In spiritual world, fences are invisible. Nevertheless, you can create good protective fences with your words. The most basic boundary setting word is no. It lets others know that you exist apart from them and that you are in control of you. No is a confrontational word. The word no is also important in setting limits on abuse. People with poor boundaries struggle with saying no to the control, pressure, demands, and sometimes the real needs of others. They feel that if they say no to someone, they will endanger their relationship with that person. How many of you can relate to that? So they passively comply, but inwardly resent. Sometimes a person is pressuring you to do something. Other times, the pressure comes from your own sense of what you should do. If you cannot say no to this external or internal pressure, you have lost control of your property and are not enjoying the fruit of control. The words also define your property for others. Your words also define your property for others as you communicate your feelings, intentions, or dislikes. It is difficult for people to know. It's difficult for people to know where you stand when you do not use words to define your property. God does this when he says, I like this and I hate that, or I will do this and I will not do that. Your words let people know where you stand and thus give them a sense of edges that help identify you. I don't like it when you yell at me. Gives people a clear message about how you conduct relationships and lets them know the rules of your yard. Geographical distance. Sometimes physically removing yourself from a situation will help maintain boundaries. You can do this to replenish yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually after you have given to your limit. Or you can remove yourself to get away from danger and put limits on evil. Removing yourself from a situation will also cause the one who is left behind to experience a loss of fellowship that may lead to changed behavior. When a relationship is abusive, many times the only way to finally show the other person that your boundaries are real is to create space until they are ready to deal with the problem. Taking time off from a person or project can be a way of regaining ownership over some out of control aspects of your life where boundaries need to be set. Adult children who have never spiritually and emotionally separated from their parents often need time away. They have spent their whole lives embracing and keeping. And have been afraid to refrain from embracing, and to throw away some of their own. What? Adult children who have never spiritually and emotionally separated from their parents often need time away. They have spent their whole lives embracing and keeping, and have been afraid to refrain from embracing and to throw away some of their outgrown ways of relating. This book sometimes has a really this chapter, at least, that's like the second time where I'm kind of like, what are you trying to say? I mean, I get it now, mostly, but like a way to kind of really go, like, the long route, right? Or is it just me? Did you get that immediately when I read it? Or were you gonna, like... They need to spend time building boundaries against the old ways and creating new ways of relating that for a while may feel alienating to their parents. This time apart usually improves their relationship with their parents. Emotional distance. Emotional distance. Emotional distance is a temporary boundary to give your heart the space it needs to be safe. It is never a permanent way of living. People who have been in abusive relationships need to find a safe place to begin to thaw out emotionally. Sometimes in abusive marriages, an abused spouse needs to keep emotional distance until the abusive partner begins to keep emotional. Sometimes in abusive marriages, the abused spouse needs to keep emotional distance until the abusive partner begins to face his or her problems and become trustworthy. You should not continue to set yourself up for hurt and disappointment. If you have been in an abusive relationship, you should have until it is safe. If you have been in an abusive relationship, you should wait until it is safe and until real patterns of change have been demonstrated before you go back. Many changes have been demonstrated before you go back. Many people are too quick to trust someone in the name of forgiveness and not sure what the other is producing fruit in keeping with repentance. To continue to open yourself up emotionally to an abusive or addicted person without seeing true change is foolish. Forgive but guard your heart until you see sustainable change. Other people. You need to depend on others to help you set and keep boundaries. People subject to other person's addictions, control, or abuse are finding that after years and years of loving too much, they can find the ability to create boundaries only through a support group. Their support system is giving them strength to say no to abuse and control for the first time in their lives. There are two reasons why you need others to help with boundaries. The first is that your most basic need in life is for relationship. People suffer much to have relationships, and many put up with abuse because they fear their partners will leave them and they will be alone if they don't stand up to them. Fear of being alone keeps many in hurtful patterns for years. They are afraid that if they set boundaries, they will not have any love in their life. When they open themselves up to support from others, however, they find that abusive persons is not only when they open themselves up to support from others. However, they find that the abusive person is not the only source of love in the world, and they can find the strength through their support system to set limits they need to set. They are no longer alone. The other reason we need others is because we need input in teaching. Many people have been taught by their church or their family that boundaries are unbiblical, mean, or selfish. These people need good biblical support systems to help them stand against the guilt that comes from old tapes inside that tell them lies to keep them in bondage. They need support. They need support of others to stand against the old messages and the guilt involved in change. In part 2, we will be Our point for now is that boundaries are not built in a vacuum. Creating boundaries always involves a support network. Trespassing on other people's property carries consequences. No trespassing signs usually carry a threat of prosecution if someone steps over the boundaries. The Bible teaches us these principles over and over, saying that if we walk one way, this will happen, and if we walk another way, that will happen. We need to back up our boundaries with consequences. How many marriages could have been saved if one spouse had followed through with their threat of, if you don't stop drinking, or coming home late at midnight, or hitting me, or yelling at the kids, I will leave until you get some treatment. Or how many young adults' lives would have been turned around if their parents had followed with their threat of no more money if you quit another job without further employment, or no bed if you continue to smoke marijuana in my house. Consequences give some good barbs to fences. They let people know the seriousness of the trespass and seriousness of our respect for others, for ourselves. They let people know the seriousness of the trespass and the seriousness of our respect for ourselves. This teaches them that our commitment to living according to helpful values is something we hold dear and will fight to protect and guard. I think we'll stop there from now, and we'll continue this in another video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you enjoy these. I felt better about this book during the first read and more confident about it, but as I'm going along, I'm not sure. So if you really aren't getting anything out of this, or you aren't enjoying it, let me know, because I'll switch to something else. But if you are enjoying it, let me know, and I'll be sure to continue it. I'm interested to see where it goes, but at the same time, it's, I'm somewhere in the